All right. I'm going to say it again. Thanks, Jordan. All right. Welcome, everybody. We are grateful you're all here today and know that more people will continue to join on, but I'd like to welcome you to our Layton Area Technical Advisory Committee for the Regional Growth Committee. My name is Spencer Brimley. I'm the chair of this committee, and our first item is intro. And then with that, after we do the intro, which Jory will do for us, of cities and participants, we'll take action on minutes from December. So Jory, I'll turn the next few minutes over to you.
Perfect. Making this easy for everybody, we'll go through attendance by community alphabetically, our organization. So we'll start with Bountiful. Anybody from Bountiful here? Fox Elder County. Bragg. Brigham City.
Paul Larson here with Brigham City.
Thanks, Paul. Centerville.
Kevin Campbell, Centerville City Engineer.
Right. Clearfield.
Spencer Brimley, Clearfield City.
Clinton.
Oh, I got Mayor
Our
Stanger.
mayor on here.
Yeah,
a second ago.
I'm here.
Davis County. Farmington.
Yeah, Shannon Hansel, Farmington City.
Shannon. Far West. Brood Heights. Harrisville. Hill Air Force Base.
Sean Cannon, Community Planner.
I think there's a
Brett Christensen, Enhanced Use Lease Office.
Paul Purcell, Enhanced Use Lease Office.
thank you. Hooper. Kaysville. Layton.
Liz Felix with Layton.
West Napoleon.
Marriott Slaterville. Mida. North Ogden. North Salt Lake City.
Allie Avery, North Salt Lake.
Barry Pace, North Salt Lake.
Ogden. Perry.
Brendan
Sorry
Repeater.
about that. Thanks, Brandon. Perry. Plain City. Pleasant View. Roy. South Ogden. South Weber.
Rod Westbrook,
Sunset.
South Weaver.
Oh, thanks, Rod.
Jason Monroe, Sunset.
Thank you. Syracuse.
Chris Davies, Syracuse City.
Uinta. Washington Terrace. Weber County. West Bountiful. West Haven. West Point.
Troy Moyes, West Point.
Thank you. Willard. Woods Cross.
Tim Stevens.
UDOT. Oh, Tim, thank you. Sorry about that. UDOT.
Hey, Aguilar, Long Range Planning, UDOT.
UTA.
Kevin Blaisdell, UTA.
Thanks, Trevin. Federal Highways. And thank you, Rosie, for putting in the WFRC staff in the chat. Is there anybody I missed or that wasn't able to sign in on roll call?
You missed
Hey,
my.
Jory, I only sent it to you.
Oh, sorry. I thought that I just glanced. What was that last one?
I know we didn't get Mike Eggett Riverdale. He just chimed in, and then it looks like I just saw in the chat Vern Kiesler, who's a consultant. Royce is attending under Noah's name, it looks like, maybe, because it sounded like Royce Davies, but I see Noah's face.
Yeah.
And then I realized why it was so quiet, because Steve Parkinson from Royce City isn't here, so that makes sense. So,
I hope he listens to this.
I
From
hope he
WFRC, Jory Johnner, Byron Head, Hugh Van Wagenen, Marshall White, Julie Bjornstead, Meg Townsend, Michaela Jordan, Miranda Jones Cox, Rosie Hernandez, Jordan Chandler, Mike Sobchak, Ed Knowlton, Nikki Navio. I think I got that. Oh, it looks like McKinsey just signed in North Salt Lake. Perfect. Back to you, Spencer.
all right, Jory, thank you. And again, if you jump on or you just jumped on and want to get your name in the chat, all right, good job, Royce. Please just put it in there, what city you're with or municipality or organization, so that we make sure we get you accounted for. Seems we have people continually jump on, and that's great. Next item of business is 1A, action on December 14, 2022 minutes. So hopefully you've had a chance to review those, and I'll consider a motion for action on those minutes from the body, whoever has reviewed them and ready to make a motion.
So moved.
All right, we've got a motion from Sunset, was that right?
Yep.
All right, and second on that?
I'll second. Allie Avery, North Salt Lake.
All right, Allie, thank you very much. And we're going to do it this way. If you are not in favor of approving the minutes, go ahead and speak up. Otherwise, we'll consider them approved unanimously. That's very good. Okay, Jory, those have been approved, and we are ready for item number 2. So item number 2 is the distinguished Ted Knowlton will lead this item for us. Overview and discussion of the RGC and TAC. It'll probably be a collaborative effort, but we're going to turn the next few minutes over to Ted on that. I know I saw
Hey,
him.
thanks, Spencer. Hey, this is our first Regional Growth Committee TAC of the year. And so the idea with this agenda item is to talk together about what we all want to get out of this group, out of this body, out of these meetings. And so in order to hear from everybody, we'd like to utilize a little device called Slido. So you can access these questions through your computer or your phone. Go to slido.com, enter that number, or there's your QR code. And there will be 3 or 4 questions, and you can answer those questions, and then also we'll have a short dialogue on each question, just for a minute or 2. And these are questions like, what should we emphasize as the objectives of this meeting? What kind of content would you like to explore in this calendar year? How often should we meet together physically in the real world? Those are the kinds of questions, just 3 of them. We won't spend a long time on any of them, but I would love to not be the only one that is speaking out loud. So join me, won't you, in this conversation about the Ogden-Layton Regional Growth Committee Technical Advisory Committee. Let's go to our first question. So this is ranking, or you slide these up and down into the, forgive me. This is, you pick any or all of these that you feel like should be prioritized beyond recent practice. So here's the ones that we've got in here. Well, one of the things we do with this is we provide input into Wasatch Choice in the Regional Transportation Plan. There's some networking that we do here. Should we discuss shared challenges more? Should we hear about best practices, planning practices more? Go back to you. Do you want to hear more about county scale initiatives or state initiatives? Talk about them. You want to share ideas and thoughts from your own community. So those are some that are on there. You don't have to pick any. You can pick, if you pick them all, then that sort of doesn't help us together prioritize. And then let me ask you, what's missing from the list? Anybody have something that you wish you was on there?
I think
What I
Ted,
gather from your silence is the list is so perfect that it takes your breath away. Okay,
I
so
like-
let's
I like-
glance at the top of that list, Michaela. So this, you're saying, hey, let's discuss our shared challenges
Hey,
more.
Ted, Ted,
Yeah,
Ted.
go ahead, please.
Spencer had some comments.
Sorry, I didn't know if I was muted or not. I just assumed I was. So Ted, I appreciate your introduction on that, and I appreciate the way that you've couched this. I think to your point that if we don't hear from the group, we'll continue to do what we've always done. And if people aren't getting what they want out of this meeting, it's because we don't know what it is their expectations are. So what in our discussion that you and I had the other day was, how can we make this more effective for people? And the only way that we can improve the effectiveness is for you to tell us what it is that you want to accomplish with this meeting. We don't want to spend an hour and a half with everybody being like, I can't wait till it's over. We really want to hear, hey, can we not do this anymore? Or we really need to add this to the list because I think it's missing from the way that we need to get things done, right?
Appreciate that. Okay, and I'll just do the final pause on this one. Anything else anybody wants to add on this list? Michaela, let's go to the next question. The next question is, this is pretty straight ahead. How often should we aim to meet in person? Or you could put it, how often would you be willing to meet in person if you knew that everybody else would come at the same time? Dory, what's our magic number on this?
We are at 44 people in the room and we have 22 answers right now. So, and I think Ted, you thumbed up WFRC and pretty much anybody can weigh in on some of these earlier,
Yeah.
right? So we're not subtracting out.
When I think Ted too, this isn't considering hybrid. I mean, hybrid sometimes creates some difficulty with people's ability. It opens opportunities for people who want to be in person, but also may have some limitations based on the location that the meeting is happening, right? So this really just is contemplating meet in person for so many times or this many times, or keep it virtual for the remainder, right? It's not a hybridization, if I understand.
Yeah, I believe that hybrid meetings are the worst kind of meetings. But I will say, just to be really clear, we would always enable remote attendance no matter what.
Okay.
But perhaps we have, taking these poll results, 1 or 2, where we really emphasize getting together in person and we have food or something like that. Maybe we play Twister. There's some reason for us.
I'm going to change my vote real quick. If Twister's on the table, my vote is changing. I'm going to tell you that right now. So, okay.
We'll keep going. Michaela, let's do the next question. Key things you'd like to discuss in Plan TAC in 2020. It's not Plan TAC. I know that. I'm sorry. The Ogden-Layton TAC, forgive me. And this is just a wide open, anything that you want, but everybody can see each other's responses here.
And Ted, on this one, you can submit a response and then at the bottom say, submit another one and you can do multiple inputs, right?
And then I'm going to call an audible we have a question that is kind of just a general catch-all right after this, which is Ogden-Layton TAC would be even better if fill in the blank. And the problem is if we go to a new question, you can no longer enter things on this question. So I'm just going to have this question be it will be kept open so that you can keep responding in this. and then we can go to our next agenda item. But just before we do that, does anybody want to comment on something you've entered into this list? And Michaela, will you scroll down so people can see kind of what, let's see if we can just gather a little bit of themes. So there's a legislative theme. There's definitely a transportation alternatives, although I kind of hate calling walking an alternative since it's the original mode, but a lot of focus on that, it seems. Water, a fair amount on the funding, it seemed like. Anyway, one thing that will happen is we will give you all these results so that you can see it coming out of this meeting. Any other, I'll turn it back to you, Spencer, if you want to comment or do any other remarks on this agenda item.
Okay, thanks, Ted. I guess on some of those, water we know is an issue, but I guess I would push a little bit to say, what about water? Is it water allocation? Is it water scarcity? Is it like, what is it about water legislation? We're all in the same boat on that. It's a frustration. It's a difficulty. The other one that I saw, funding, what is it? And I think Paul asked that or put that out there, funding. What do we mean by funding? Is it funding of projects? Is it grant funding? Is it multiple sources of funding? I mean, I just want to make sure that we can drill down on these. Otherwise, these broad topics are great and they're a starting point, but they don't give us a lot unless we just decide, oh, it's this or that without some additional input. So if any of you who put items in there that you wouldn't mind either speaking up or putting additional information in the chat, that would be awesome.
This is Paul. I think I guess I was just really talking any funding for all of the things that we get involved in, whether it's planning grants, transportation. We're always on the lookout for money.
Okay.
Even if it's to supplement planner salaries.
I think it's a great point, Paul.
Okay. No, that's great, Paul. I appreciate your clarification on that too. So that's, to me, that's very helpful to better understand some of that context. Okay.
If I could jump in, this is Barton from
Please.
Ogden. One of the places I worked was in Oregon, and Oregon would give grants to cities to update their zoning ordinances, and they kept on giving the same grant to the same cities to do the same ordinances, and they finally wised up and says, why don't we just write a statewide model ordinance? And then if you want to grab a chapter on water-wise landscaping or a chapter on procedures or a chapter on mobility or how to do bus stops or bike parking, just take our chapter and our model ordinance and adopt it. And it really worked well because we knew what the state wanted. We had a good draft there, and it was cheaper overall instead of funding every little city to do the same project over and over.
Great point, Barton. No, that's great information.
One of the things that we see increasingly is unfunded mandates from the legislature. I guess, it would be nice if there would be some funding sources identified to help us comply with the mandates to give us, whether it's affordable housing planning or affordable housing reporting, water elements, et cetera, et cetera. And my comment about supplementing planner salaries was intended in jest, lest I be accused of trying to funnel money into our pockets.
I think we understood, Paul. We all understood. But that's great feedback, great information. Allie made a comment about micromobility, getting agreements across city boundaries to make them effective. I couldn't agree more. And then Jay called out Paul. I won't say any more than that. You can read the chat, but thanks for the input, everybody. This has been great, and we appreciate your willingness to engage. Again, this only gets better and improves and becomes more effective as we as a group get together and discuss these things and actually give feedback rather than just listen quietly and let things proceed on. So Ted, anything else to add on that item or?
No, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted. Appreciate your kind of scoping that and providing that and everybody's participation. So item number 3 is a legislative update from Miranda. And so we'll turn the next 20 so or minutes over to her.
Oh, 20. That's a good chunk of time.
You
But
take whatever you need, Miranda.
okay. Well, happy to share a little bit today about the legislative session, and interestingly, a lot of y'all's responses on that poll was legislation and what's happening up at the legislature. And so I'll share some things here, but I of course would welcome any questions from this group if there are specific things that you all have in mind or specific questions that you guys are wondering about what's going on up on Capitol Hill right now. I'd be happy to answer as many of those as possible. So with that, I'll get started, and I'll kind of break this down into 2 pieces, appropriations and legislation. And that's really what it comes down to up on Capitol Hill about what we're watching during and engaging in during the legislative session. Right now, we have about 2.5 weeks left of the session. So things are coming to an end very quickly. And so there's limited time to make an impact up there and make sure that your voice is heard and make sure that some of these issues that are important to you you're engaging in. Specifically with appropriations, and maybe that's what we'll start with first, is the very beginning of legislative session is when the appropriations process started. So legislators, community stakeholders, special interest groups came to the legislature with funding requests. And the appropriation subcommittees were able to rank or prioritize ultimately what they think should be funded out of this process. Their rankings then now have gone to the Executive Appropriations Committee, which is the body that ultimately decides what gets funded. So EAC, they're currently meeting, trying to decide what are these like big buckets of funding, where are they putting their money in, whether it's infrastructure, education, etc. And one thing that's positive that we've heard coming out of those discussions so far is that the legislature really wants to see investment in infrastructure that has a regional impact or a statewide impact, which we're, of course, at WFRC are very supportive of. I'm going to go through a few of the appropriations that WFRC is, that we would consider our priority appropriations, specifically around transportation. There are a lot of appropriations out there, or appropriation requests out there, in the hundreds of requests and totaling nearly $3 billion worth of requests. The legislature doesn't have that much money to put towards all these asks. But we'll start seeing these decisions from EAC probably next week, maybe middle to the end of the week after they release the revenue estimates, the consensus revenue estimates, that ultimately says this is how much money we have to work with. And so this is what we're going to fund. And so with that, I just want to run through a few appropriations that we think are worth noting. The first, so I'm going to kind of break it down into transportation modes. So active transportation, transit, and roadway. So first being active transportation. What I have here on the slide is the appropriation, the amount, and then where it ranked in the subcommittee, the appropriation subcommittee. So the Utah Trails Network went through the Infrastructure and General Government Appropriation Subcommittee. The Utah Trails Network is kind of broken out into 2 pieces. One is it's in a bill. There's ongoing money in a bill that I'll get to in just a moment. And then there's also this one-time piece that's going through the appropriations process. So that was ranked 7 out of 71 requests, which is actually ranked pretty well. The higher the ranking, the more likely it is that it will actually be funded. This, and people mentioned this as well in the poll, is interest in where the governor's trails proposal is. It's right here. It's working its way through the legislative process to ultimately get funding, and then UDOT will be able to move forward with implementing the trails network. So the ongoing money is the most important piece because it provides stable, consistent funding for active transportation, but the one-time funding is also really important as well. So both of those are moving positively through the legislative process. And I think I would feel confident saying that we shouldn't run into too many hiccups getting this passed and funded, but we're not done yet. So second is the Zero Fare Transit Pilot. This was also a governor's budget proposal that would have provided a statewide zero fare transit pilot for a year to further study the impacts of a zero fare transit system. This one, unfortunately, did not rank as positively or as highly as others have. It neared the bottom of the list at 61 of 71 priorities. I'm not calling anything dead until session is over, but it is unfortunate that it was ranked so low in those rankings. And so I guess we'll see exactly what happens with that one. Corridor preservation fund. Well, real quick. So we talked about trails. Next, transit. I also want to touch on transit, and it's not included on here. I may have left it off, but there has been a proposal for money towards the Point of the Mountain transit option. And then also over the past few years, the legislature has put money towards the double tracking of Front Runner. We wouldn't be surprised if the legislature continues to put additional one-time funding towards the Front Runner project or towards the Point of the Mountain project. The Point of the Mountain project did not rank well, and there was no formal request for Front Runner in the appropriations process, but we may potentially see funding for that project. It's also going through the federal capital investment grant process right now for roughly a $500 million ask to supplement the existing funding that the state has already put towards the double tracking of Front Runner. So we'll see on that one. And then a few that kind of touch on all areas. Corridor preservation. There was a request for $120 million for the state's Corridor Preservation Fund that ranked very high at 4 of 71 priorities. Many of you obviously know what corridor preservation is, but just would allow the state to better, more proactively plan for and purchase right of way and different corridors ahead of time. $100 million for the State Infrastructure Bank. Again, talking about funding opportunities or funding sources. The State Infrastructure Bank is definitely a source that I think local governments have used and continue to use as for transportation projects. This would have put another $100 million into that revolving loan fund and it was ranked 30 of 71. Lastly, there's a regional grid network study that was funded internally with some savings that the committee had. This will be a study that will be done between MAG, WFRC, UDOT, UTA. And then lastly, of our multimodal approach is roads. And the legislature hasn't really come out with a bill that funds specific projects, specific roadway projects, or said, we're going to put, how much money towards roads. What they have said is we want to pay down our existing transportation debt that UDOT holds. So the idea is that they would set funding aside to pay off the transportation debt, which would then free up the transportation investment fund to put that funding towards other transportation projects. So it's kind of a swap of money of sorts. But ultimately, it would give UDOT more flexibility each year that they're not paying for debt service to put elsewhere, which is great. So that's appropriations. There's a lot of other appropriations that I'll actually link my appropriations tracker here in the chat. It shows all the rankings. It has different links so you could get more information. Not all of them are priority WFRC appropriations, but if you're interested in maybe what's out there in this space, I'll link that once I'm done here with my presentation. And then lastly, talk about legislation. There's a lot of bills out there, of course. I think the legislature's upwards of, I don't know, maybe not 1,000 bill requests yet, but maybe there's quite a few out there. And so two key ones that I think are worth noting. One is is SB 185, transportation revisions. This includes the Utah Trail Network, like I mentioned before. This basically creates the Active Transportation Investment Fund, which would put that ongoing funding towards trails and the Governor's Trail Network. It also extends the deadline to oppose the fifth local option sales tax. Currently, the fifth will expire at the end of this fiscal year, I believe. And so it extends it out another 3 years. And there's also a bill that will soon be coming out that further addresses the fifth and some proposed changes to that, like allowing the fifth to be used exclusively for transit like it is currently. But another option to split that between transit, cities, and counties, and being able to use those funds for transportation uses, not just transit related. So that one I think should be released in the coming days, but it is getting out a little late. And then lastly on that one, it expands the state infrastructure bank to greenfield development. And then last bill I just want to touch on, this is HB 301, transportation tax amendments. This is a Representative Schultz bill. It does 3 main things. One, it creates a tax on the charge or what you're paying for a charge at an electric vehicle charging station. We're calling it the charge on the charge on the charge. It basically requires those vehicle EV charging stations, not residential, but those along the interstate, to now charge for the electricity for which people are charging their EVs. It also increases registration fees by $5, and it also creates a short-term gas tax cut. It's in the short term, and then it will eventually go back up. But this bill kind of does a bunch of things with electric vehicles, and then what we're paying for our gas. So those are 2 major ones. I'll also link, in addition to the appropriations tracker, the bill tracker that WFRC has that tracks not only transportation bills, but some housing bills, some land use bills, air quality, things like that. And definitely would recommend you all looking through that if you have some time, or if you're more curious about certain bills that are out there. I'd also recommend taking a look at the Utah League of Cities and Towns bill tracking list, because they have a lot of bills that are relevant to you all in your areas that maybe we're not tracking quite as closely. So with that, I mean, if anyone has any specific questions, if you're curious about what's happening up on the Hill, I'd be happy to answer them. And if not, I'll hand things back over to you.
Hey, I have a question for you, Miranda.
Sure, sure.
The first, it's a kind of a 2-parter, and one's a comment with Governor Cox's with the trail statewide network.
Yeah.
He said he's not going to give cities and the power of eminent domain for trails. But he's not is that going to be a stumbling block to having a statewide network if we can't, if we have impasses with key property owners? I know we do in Farmington on some of our key regional trails. And
Yeah,
thought that went through it. They talked about it.
yeah. So that's a great question. I don't know that I have a good answer for that. Hugh might be able to weigh in a little bit too, since he shrugs. I think UDOT is still comprehending exactly what this trail network initiative is going to look like, and fully flesh out what the program looks like generally. The governor did say that. I would assume UDOT will stick to that. But you're right. I could foresee that being a challenge with administering the Trails Network. So
Then there's one other that I understand could be a reality. They're looking at taking away the city's power for condemnation to acquire park property. Have you heard about that one?
So yes, and I think there may have been a bill file that was opened at one point for this, but I think it died or hasn't been released yet. To my knowledge, I haven't seen that come out yet. And that would, of course, that could be concerning for sure. But if I do see that pop up, I'd be happy to reach out and let you know. But to date, I haven't seen that yet. So.
Hey, great. Right.
This is Paul Larson. Just to chime in on that, I mean, just think about, imagine that the legislature took away UDOT's eminent domain ability and trying to put together a road project without the ability to use eminent domain. With the trail, it's a smaller scale, obviously, but how you put together a statewide trail network without the ability to use that, I don't know. Unless you deviate miles in each direction to bring a trail network together. So it kind of makes one wonder just how serious the effort is.
No, those are great points you all have. And of course, like we at WFRC aren't the ones administering this program or really in the weeds of putting it together. But I would recommend that as you guys are thinking about how to accomplish this goal, this initiative, that it definitely makes sense for you to reach out to UDOT and to share some of these concerns or ideas that you have about how to link these existing trails, how to prioritize, etc. And then I'm sure they'd be happy to discuss more as they're putting this program together. So,
and also too, Paul, just piggybacking on what you just said, the power of condemnation isn't necessarily that the city wants to go in and condemn something. Last time Farmington really used it was on the heels of the floods of '83 when we were trying to create a regional detention basin. What we use the power of condemnation for is when we're negotiating with a property owner assembling land where we can use eminent domain. We say to the property owner, hey, as we're negotiating price, let us write a condemnation letter putting you on notice, and then you don't need to do a 1031 exchange within a short amount of time, 6 months or whatever it is. You have 3 years now to look for another piece of property you want without losing your capital gains. And that every property owner we've dealt with says, really? Sweet. But if that power of condemnation is taken from us, we cannot benefit the property owner in other ways. Even if we, just having the ability to have the threat of it is a benefit to everyone, and the benefit to the property owners who we acquire land from. And I don't think the state has thought things through on some of this. So anyway, those are my 2 bits.
Dave, I was just gonna let you know it's House Bill 196. And it said the last action was that it had its first reading where it was introduced in the House Rules Committee, and then nothing since then.
Yeah. Okay. So it was introduced, but it died in rules. So it wasn't Once it goes to, it'll sometimes be sent to rules, and then the rules chair will just say, I'm not going to even assign it a committee for it to be heard in, because I want it to die here. So, and that's, I think, what happened there. So, but thanks for sharing that, Ally. I forgot about that number. Okay, anything else from anyone while we're on the topic? And not
Nope.
Spencer, take it away.
Thanks, Miranda. Good comments and good commentary. Appreciate the feedback, Dave. Thanks for bringing those things up. And then looks like Brad McElrath just brought this up as a good example of for us to collaborate on this legislation as things happen at the legislature, for all of us to be involved, because we have experience that could help other communities who haven't been through some of the hard times or the weird times. So thanks again for the discussion, everybody. Our next item is Michaela, and she put a reminder that, hey, we're going to be using Slido for this next item, right, Michaela?
Yes.
To talk about ordinance assistance. So if you've got the Slido still pulled up, great. If not, slido.com, and then punch in the old digits that she's provided there in the chat so that you can participate in this next item. So Michaela, over to you.
Thanks, Spencer. Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to talk to you about an opportunity that WFRC is in the process of starting. We are hoping to set up to help communities with ordinance review and minor updates. And this opportunity would be at no cost to communities. And the goal is basically to make planning assistance more accessible and to respond to community needs for planning assistance a bit more nimbly and quickly. This would be a new effort under our Transportation and Land Use Connection program, and that TLC program would still remain available and be the place that we would direct you to for major code updates. So this would be to, either help you identify barriers or gaps in your code, to kind of just do that first step, maybe to help with specific minor updates. And we have a Slido again for this topic today to learn a little bit more about your community's struggles or opportunities with ordinances, and hope that will help us shape this program to be the most effective that it can be for communities in our region. So open up the first question here. Which of your ordinances do you consider the most dated? Sign ordinance, parking were two very common responses in the Salt Lake West Valley TAC this morning. Subdivisions, zoning, all of them. All of zoning, more on sign and parking, more on subdivision, non-conforming uses, okay. AT. Keep this open for just a little bit more. Would anyone like to comment on their response to this question?
Hi, Michaela. This is Liz with Layton City.
Hi, Liz.
Hi, I had a question. This is actually really exciting to listen that you guys are rolling this out. At least for us here at the city, we're currently doing our active transportation project, and that was thankfully funded through the TLC program. I actually am the one that entered our active transportation ordinance. Kind of doesn't exist, and that's one of the things that's kind of come out of this planning effort, is like that's what the city at least anticipates to move forward with potentially next. How can we implement any policy ordinances to support our active transportation plan? Where it doesn't exist, is this something that WFRC with this program is still willing to give feedback to the communities?
Yeah, that sounds like it would be a great fit. We will have an application process and to learn a bit more about, exactly what the city's looking for, to evaluate that, and see what our staff capacity is to take on the projects. But just from your brief description, that sounds like it would be a good fit. We're also, along with this, trying to compile an interactive map with example ordinances from around the state. And so far I have gathered like some bike parking ordinances and some of the micromobility ordinances that exist. And so we're hoping to have that resource available as well as the program. So cities have a place to turn to where they can look at what's being done. And if you have any ordinances that you're really proud of, feel free to send me a message in the chat or an email. And I can make sure to look into those and add those to the resource.
Awesome, thank you. Hey, is this going to be available just like on your website as a link, or do we have to reach out to you directly for like the application?
We will have something posted on our website, and we'll announce it when it's formally released and running. For now, it's in the works, but we're definitely hoping to get it rolling soon.
Well, awesome. Thank you. I'm excited.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, I'll move on to the next question. This one's asking which, if any, of your ordinances might mismatch with your community's desired quality of life outcomes. So in other words, you have your general plan or your stationary plan or your active transportation plan, and you have vision for your community for those different things. And are there any ordinances that you currently have that aren't promoting that vision? We're on zoning and parking, specifically single family zoning, traffic calming. Lots of parking and zoning, auto-oriented regulations. This morning, we heard a lot of fire code responses. And we heard some about multifamily development and design standards. Okay, I am going to continue on. That's a quicker response time, but if you have more thoughts on this, feel free to post in the chat or send a message. Okay. Which, if any, of your ordinances have potential inconsistencies with state law? All of them, oh no, subdivision.
Allie had a somewhat funny comment in the chat, and I had thought about that this morning, that like, we're gonna be careful that, this is just information only. No one will be held accountable or reported.
Yes, this is why it is anonymous.
Yeah, it's still anonymous, so that we've got that one safeguard.
Although it is being recorded, so.
Thanks,
Julie.
So far we've had a Hatch Act violation, and now everyone is admitting to things they haven't been doing well. So really great.
This is all subject to a legislative audit, right?
And again, to reiterate, right, we're using this to guide how this program runs, what we can specifically do to make sure that it's helpful, can also guide us in, when we're reaching out to communities to see like, hey, do you need help with this specific ordinance? Or things like that. So thank you, everyone, for being willing to answer. On to the next question. This one be pretty quick. It's multiple choice. How often do developers find your code difficult to navigate?
Do we have any developers on the call or in the meeting?
I know we had a consultant on, but I don't know if there's any private sector planners, developers, anybody of that.
We had some good feedback this morning from a developer that the other side of the coin. It was interesting.
Yeah, I'll share what he said, because I also found it really interesting, Jory. He was talking about how it can be really hard to know where to look in city codes, because it's not just that cities have different standards or ordinances, but they're nestled in different places in the code, and sometimes they'll look and just not find what they need to be finding. So I thought that was an interesting point. And then cities shared their perspective on that as well, but actually the results here mirror pretty much exactly what the results were this morning on this question. Okay, and I'll stop sharing. If you're willing to share your city with us, just so we can correlate responses and reach out to you about specific assistance we might be able to provide, that's great. If you would rather not say which city you're from, totally understand that as well. And before I turn it back to Spencer, I wanted to share some more remarks about this. So kind of, as I said in the beginning, we want to offer in-house WFRC staff planning assistance in this realm. This could look like evaluating your code for gaps, barriers, or contradictions. It could look like identifying parts of your code that your community needs or wants, but are not present, or parts of your code that are not best practice. And it could also look like helping with some minor code updates and best practice recommendations. For major code updates, again, we would direct you to applying for the Transportation and Land Use Connection Program. But that is what that would look like. Are there any questions or comments on that? I see Brad, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, just a comment on that. So I know that you're looking to do this a little bit more, and from our experience, we were able to get your help, Michaela, specifically in WFRC to evaluate our parking in the city. And so we did a complete parking analysis and parking counts based upon that. And I felt like that was a really good, resource for us, because that's really helping us, know what we should change with our parking, where we're over parking, where we're under parking. And it really provided us our local context in a good way. So, anybody that's probably interested in this in the future, I can be an advocate to say I think it's a great resource. If WFRC is able to do this more, I think it's really helpful for us.
Thanks, Brad. That's good to hear. That was a really fun project. I think for full parking studies and analyses like the one that was done in Clearfield through TLC, we would still direct you to TLC, but this is kind of like a starting point, getting the first few steps done, helping to streamline the process, things like that. So as part of this, one thing we wanted to get your feedback on is the idea of creating a sounding committee. This would be composed of an architect, an engineer, developer, a planner, and maybe a land use attorney. And basically we would ask for their review and recommendations on our work when it's fully drafted, just to get their feedback as professionals who would be interacting with your code. It could be anonymous, as in we take away the city identifiers, or if your city's uninterested, you wouldn't have to have that part of this assistance. But I wanted to pause and ask you all if you would think that this would be helpful if this would be of value to your city.
Is this the participation part, Michaela?
Yes.
Michaela, I was just about to do a TED. Yes, it would be.
You can even put it in the chat if you want to put it there, but some sort of response would be helpful, I think, everybody.
You know, it's not fair for me to respond, but I will anyway. I'm thinking that you as a staff person for a city, you might already know everything that you might hear from, let's say hypothetically that you know everything that you would hear from an audit. An audit can still be like a little nudge. Oh, there's a third party group of representing a few different disciplines, and they took a look at our codes and they've suggested a few modifications. And that, I mean, that's yet another thing I think that could be valuable about this. It just can be an external nudge to get you moving down a direction that you feel like, look, we needed to do this. So
Thanks, Ted. And several people have commented yes in the chat, so appreciate that. If you have any thoughts or about how this could be most helpful, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat. But yeah, we just want to help in this area wherever we can. So let me know and I'll turn it back to Spencer.
Thanks, Michaela. Great information, great opportunity. And thanks to those of you who are responding. And I saw Liz Felix put a thumbs up on her thing in case nobody saw that. So item number 5 on our agenda is zero fare transit study. Julie Bornstad, we are going to turn the next few minutes over to you.
Okay, thanks. So we just wrapped up this regional zero fare study. It was a joint study with Maryland Association of Governments, UDOT, and UTA. And so I just thought we would take a few minutes or 15 for the agenda and just kind of go over what the study was and what some of the outcomes were for your benefit. Miranda mentioned before that this was in the governor's budget and was on that appropriations list, ranked in the bottom 15%, but hopefully over time, maybe this idea gets some traction and we can do that 1-year pilot program. So the zero fare study was partly built on some of the successes that UTA saw in its 2022 Fare Free February. We saw a lot of increases in ridership across all modes, on Sunday service, late night service. We saw good safety, customer experience, and then some funding support. And then there's been more interest in maybe what either implementation of zero fare, what some of the longer term impacts would be. In the last legislative session, there were 2 bills, one in the House and one in the Senate, that would prohibit UTA from charging fares. So this has been a topic of conversation for at least a year or 2 now. And so we are really trying to provide a data-informed process. A lot of the conversation around zero fare has been incidental or kind of opinionated one way or the other. And so we were just saying, you know, if these conversations are happening, then we want them to be informed conversations. So one of the reasons to look at fares as a way of increasing transit ridership is that UTA does not actually get a lot of money from its fares. If you look on the left, that's the UTA budget by revenue source. You see that the majority of it is sales tax, and just about 5% is coming from your passenger or your fare revenue. That's including past programs. Also, fares have been decreasing over time in terms of how they support operating costs. So in the past few years, it's less than 10% of all operating costs are covered by fare. So although it might be somewhat, you know, sizable to replace, it's actually not that big over in the overall picture. Zero fare is actually also not new to either UTA or the state. So UTA, of course, has already done things like free fare February. Sorry. Sometimes that alliteration is tricky.
And then right now and for the next few days is another pilot program for the NBA All-Star Game. So no fares on any of its service, longer span of service on tracks, for instance, and then Sunday service. This Sunday we'll have front runner service. There's also the downtown zero fares, free fare zone in Salt Lake. And then UVX and OGX, when it is up and running, are both zero fare routes. Then throughout the state, there's of course Logan and Park City and High Valley, but there's also places like Uinta Basin, the Zion Shuttle, the Bryan Head Shuttle, actually all the transit service in the state, with the exception of UTA, the Cedar Area Transportation Service, and then SunTran and St. George are free. So there's lots of precedents both in the UTA service and the state. So then when we look at what people are paying these days, over half of UTA's riders receive some type of discount. If that's in Salt Lake, there's the Public School Transit Pass program. All public school employees, staff, and faculty get free transit. There's also the Hive Pass, which is discounted. There's our university students throughout the state, and then employers pay for passes, and there's some human services agencies that get a discount. So only about 44% of UTA's riders pay that full fare, which in other words is a really complicated fare structure. If you've ever noticed that buses are a flat rate, as is tracks, but buses you pay on board, tracks you pay off board. Commuter rail is by the number of stations you pay off board, right? But then the on demand you pay on the app. And so every sort of mode has its own either payment structure where you pay, and it can get complicated. So this study looked at what happens if you remove some of those barriers to transit, that being the barrier of fare. And so we looked at what some of the operational and financial effects of zero fare would be, interviewed some key stakeholders on their transit values. And again, like I said, we're trying to objectively inform decision-making. So the our studies looked at 4 different alternatives: zero fare from the whole system, all modes of travel, zero fare on bus, paratransit, and then on-demand, the VIA service, zero fare for low-income riders, and then just across the board, lower fare, reduce the base to $1, and then all passes and everything else would come down 60%. So yeah, we basically had 3 key themes about what we were asking. How does this affect the service? How does this affect financial? And then what are some of the community benefits? And sort of overall on the impacts of alternatives, there's increases to ridership on sort of all modes. There's savings that are projected for UTA, and that comes from being able to operate faster service without having to do fare collection. And then there's a lot of savings from the actual fare collection equipment itself. So yes, you have to pay for the mechanism to get the fare, and then you have to pay people to collect that fare, to count it. And that system is actually relatively expensive. And then there's some projected increases to cost. This includes increases to paratransit service whenever we're increasing fixed route bus service. And then what happens when we become when we start getting to the point where we're over capacity. So some things that might be over capacity in the future is like the Route 2 in downtown Salt Lake, for instance. Some of the on-demand is sort of at capacity now. And so there's some cost associated with that increase in service. So this is the sort of overall picture in terms of ridership and the cost impact or the financial impact. For the whole system being zero fare, we saw a 24 to 36% increase in ridership, coming at a cost of $30 to $35 million. For the bus only zero fare, the ridership increase was about 12 to 18%. And that came at a cost of $20 to $25 million more. For low income, it was a ridership increase of 5 to almost 8% at about a $4 million impact. And you'll see that this is lower than maybe the other two previous scenarios, partially because this already exists, but partially also because there's still that barrier to entry. You usually have to prove that you're low income to get this, and that barrier makes that ridership improvement lower than maybe you would think otherwise. And then the $1 base fare had about a 10% ridership increase at a cost of about $9 million. So some possible path forward from here is that we can keep the existing fare structure. This is going to require UTA to upgrade their current fare collection technology, and I think that's about $30 to $40 million. And then there's like an ongoing maintenance cost. And then we would expect that ridership would continue to increase from the low of 2020. There's partial implementation, so that's the bus only, low income, or the base fare decrease. And this would cost $4 to $24 million to make up for lost revenue, would have a modest ridership increase, but still requires that fare collection technology improvement. And then system-wide would not require that technology to be updated. Would cost about $34 to $38 million, depending if you're looking at a one-time pilot or permanent, and then would give us the biggest increase in ridership. So that was what we found in the study. We know at this point, Moran's a little bit more optimistic maybe, but it's unlikely that one-year pilot's going to be funded. It's unlikely right now that there's a permanent zero fare, but we just wanted the conversation to be informed with what some of the outcomes might be. Sherry, we looked at maybe what the model, the travel demand model told us in terms of how this impacts congestion and air quality. I don't have that top number off the top of my head. I can send you the study if you wanted to read that part. As far as like the congestion, I think that the system-wide zero fare in the peak hour would save us like a third of a lane on the I-15 in terms of congestion and vehicle trips. But of course, there is some benefit from air quality. And we didn't look at the savings for road maintenance or capacity. There's a few things that the study was maybe a little bit more limited in scope. So we didn't look at the impact to development or real estate prices or anything like that. It was mostly trying to figure out how the ridership would increase and what that impact would be financially. So if you're interested in the study, hopefully I'll get the website updated this week for the put the final report in. Otherwise, you can just chat me your email address and I can send you the final report if you're interested in that.
Anything else, Julie, or questions? Let's see here.
Shannon, did you want to, it looks like you put something in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, I answered Sherry and Barton's questions.
You see the
There's
one
one
from
more then.
Farmington? Yeah.
The Farmington one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might have been Dave.
Shannon.
That was me. It'd be so cool to have a very, very clear day of that snow-capped mountain range. We ate that beautiful. It's awesome. Hopefully there's not an inversion. I'm like, so ABC needs to film right now to and show the pictures as if it were Sunday. So the rest of this country thinks, you know, we're an awesome place without inversions.
We can just do some cloud seeding on Saturday.
Have faith it'll be clear on Sunday, Dave. Have faith that it'll be clear.
Dave,
Oh, I hope so.
My daughter may disagree. She's kind of opposed to more people moving here, so she might just want it to look gloomy and icky, and then no one else wants to come move in.
Oh, I can see that too. That's good. Yeah.
The constant battle of Utah. Okay, anything else, Julie?
No? Oh yeah, let me stop sharing. Sorry.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate the information. All right, Ted, we've got another item on parking modernization.
Oh, yeah, you know, I sometimes refer to parking as the most important boring topic in the world. Because I think most people, when they hear that you want to talk about parking, that are not a planner, they're like, you are, what do I even do with you that you care so much about something so mundane? But we all know that it's a massive use of land. It's a visually hugely impactful, and it's expensive. And I think that's part of the reason why you saw so much of that coming up in the ordinance section of this. So you may know that the transportation partners in Utah are working on a parking modernization study. I think we've talked about it before. I'm going to turn to Julie. Julie, do you want to do a couple of sentences about what that is? And then right after her, what this agenda item aims to do is have you be a focus group to help us figure out how we communicate the outcome of the parking modernization study. Julie?
Yeah, so the modernization study looked at a few things. First, we looked at some of the impacts that too much parking was having on land use, on real estate, on mode share. And then we looked at different strategies that cities or developments could use to better match parking supply and parking demand. And so this guide, it will be a guidebook and a toolbox to kind of help communities as they rethink sort of the oversupply of parking. We're not suggesting that you get rid of all parking, but we are saying that we are overbuilt in terms of the number of parking spaces, and that overbuilding has impacted our communities in a negative way. And here's some solutions that we can implement going forward.
Thanks, Julie. Julie is the project manager for that effort. And I'll add one sentence, which is the term parking modernization is there because the notion here is that the world has changed a lot in the last 5 years. And that's part of the reason why there's an actual imperative it's more than just a good idea. It's actually something that if you don't do it, you're getting left behind. Hence the phrase parking modernization. Now, here's the idea. Don't answer there's a few questions that we want to have you, again, Slido, but again, verbalize your responses as well, because there's some, but don't answer these questions on your own behalf. Think about what would be motivating or concerning for your typical planning commission in your community, the typical city council in your community. If you don't work for a community, local government representatives that you do interact with, right? Just channel their issues, wants, and concerns as we just do this quick focus group, okay? It'll become a little bit clearer as we pull these up. Go ahead, Michaela. So the idea here is let's speak to those that don't currently care about parking. Let's see if we can increase the number of people that kind of want to tackle this question. And so when you think about a typical planning commissioner in your community, generally, what are the primary motivations you think that would lead them to want to rethink your parking regulations? Make sense as a question? So there's 6 options there. And if you think something is missing from the 6, throw it into the chat or unmute and say it. So here's the 6. Hey, it would motivate somebody, planning commissioner, to rethink parking because we're talking about, hey, this is a great way to increase economic output. That's 1. Or it's a great way to improve walkability in your city. That's 2. 3, parking has an impact on housing affordability. Would that be motivating? as you go through this, you know what you do here is you're ranking these. What is the most motivating message? What's the least motivating message? Okay, number 1 would be your most motivating message. Number 6 would be your least motivating message. You just drag and drop them through Slido. And then the ones that I didn't get to, hey, we need to better respect private property rights. Do you think that would be motivating? Sharing an alternative. What are the ones I'm missing, Michaela? The private sector is better at making customized decisions. And I think there was one more. Sharing and alternative parking formats can be more efficient. I might have missed one. But so you're just kind of sliding those up and down in terms of what you think is the most motivating. Now, I'll stop talking. What would you have added to that list? Not for you, but for what you think would be motivating to, you know, officials in your community.
Quickly here that it automatically bounces back to the top when you scroll. So sorry if anyone got dizzy at all the jumping up and down there.
Okay, and you feel free to throw something in the chat or unmute, and we'll just spend another 30 seconds on this one, and then we'll go to the next question. I'll start queuing up the next question in just a second. Does anybody feel like sharing? Because sharing is caring. I've heard that.
I'll share that we have lots of old buildings that are poorly used, and somebody comes in and tries to reuse it, and the first thing we say is, well, you don't have enough parking, so that building stays vacant.
Right.
Outcome.
That's a great point, Barton. Motivating, right?
I think actual data would be motivating for decision makers. So instead of using the ICE data, you can go to local places and do parking studies that actually show the amount of parking that's being used.
Okay. And there, I think there's even an option in here that sort of relates, which is national data doesn't fit us. And I guess, Allie, you're giving up the important corollary to that is, well, if national data can't possibly fit you, you do have to have data. And the data needs to be local. I appreciate that. Julie, feel free to jump in anytime as well. Let's go to the next. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a comment in the chat from Paul, if you want to take a quick look at that.
Yeah.
Or Paul can elaborate if available.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I don't know if other communities have this same issue, but if we were to apply reduced parking ratios as it currently stands, I think what we would find out is that we're severely underparked. We have very limited transit availability. And so if you're commuting to, you know, we have thousands of people that commute out of the county every day for work. If they were relying on transit for that, they'd eat up most of their day just on the commute. So that just doesn't happen. And so we do consider parking reductions if they're justified, but until we get some much more robust transit, I just don't see our city council or our planning commission being very interested in parking reductions.
Okay. Appreciate that. And there's two more questions. One of the questions is, what are the major hesitancies or criticisms? And so we'll come back to that. This second question is, the first one was like, what are general motivating messages? This one is, what would motivate spark a change now, based on the notion that the parking dynamics have shifted quite a bit recently. So what is it about today's parking dynamics that would spark action to change in your community? And so this is a little bit different. We won't take as long on this because it has some similarity, but you can see, well, there's a big change in our housing affordability. Construction costs have shifted a lot. That affects especially structured parking. Telework has changed significantly. Uber and Lyft phenomenon. State legislative interest in affordability and what communities are doing. Amazonization of retail. And again, there may be something missing here. But this is kind of what is new that is motivating when we think about parking dynamics. And by all means, what's missing on this?
Ted,
Yeah, go ahead, Weston.
this is Weston Clayton. You know, I don't know if this is completely connected to parking, but one of the things that we've seen is a massive spike in drive-through activity.
Oh, okay.
And so our drive-throughs are just blown up. And so where are these people going? Are they taking it back home? Are they eating in their vehicle parked somewhere? It's just an additional component that also takes up surface area as well.
That's a great point. One of the responses we got to the other this morning was electric vehicles. Now that doesn't change perhaps the number of parking spaces, but the question is how many parking spaces should have charging capability. And if you wanted to address that in your codes and ordinances, that's another reason to say, look, we gotta dust them off and take a new look at them. Any other ones on this one? And then we'll move to our third and final question on this little focus group. Weston, thanks for that. So we're going to the last one, which is, it's the flip side. What are the most common or strongly held criticisms you hear against the idea of parking reform? Businesses without enough parking will fail. We don't have any transit in our community, or very little. Spillover parking. But you know, by the way, you can actually enter the ones I just said in here, but what are the main ones that you hear from your community? I presume that they meant car, but I do like that.
Cats take up a lot of space. They're pretty needy, so it could be cats.
You do remember Toons is the driving cat, right?
Yes.
Well, if you don't, Google it. Spillover for sure. Can somebody elaborate on the we should not allow on-street parking? Is that snow removal? Is that emergency service? What's the message you get?
It really just comes from not wanting vehicles on a road. There's no real good reason for it.
Okay.
Just a feeling that vehicles should be parked off street.
Okay.
In our case, one of the things that we see with on-street parking is that during this year has been a good example. When we get snow piling up, you know, you end up with streets that don't get plowed entirely because cars are in the way, and you get cars that get buried in snow from the snow plow going around them. And it's kind of a self-fulfilling loop where the car doesn't move, so it gets covered with snow. The they can't move the car because it's covered with snow. And the rest of the neighborhood suffers from that. I've got, my street is a great example.
Appreciate that, Paul.
Also, I think the snow thing is a regional thinking type thing as well. A few years ago, our city council took a field trip to Denver to look at some of their and TODs and things like that. And a lot of people were parking on the street and in alleys. And one of our city council members asked the tour guide, who had been a consultant for us before here in Utah, guess you guys don't have as much snow as us because you allow on-street parking. He said, Denver has more snow than Salt Lake. And he said, I'm an Aggie. I went to school at Logan. I can assure you, the Denver area has more snow. We have something culturally that when that first flake falls on the street, it's got to be plowed no matter what. And especially in our suburban areas, and that other areas of the country do not have, aren't fanatical about plowing snow as a lot of Utah communities are. So, but it is part of us. It is who we are, even though we're getting less and less snow. It's still a mental barrier for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, it's been a few years, but I ran a 50-year weather statistic report on Brigham City. And that report showed an average of 19 days a year of measurable snowfall. We've blown right past that this year. The number of days that the plows have been out is far in excess of 19. But we've had years like last year, a couple of years ago, where maybe 2 or 3 times the whole year. So it varies. I understand what you're saying. It is to some degree a cultural thing, but some of it also depends on, what's the slope of the street, what's the nature of the neighborhood, who's living there, and how wide is the streets. How much does a neighbor's parked car affect my ability to get out onto the street during that kind of situation? It's just, I'm not an opponent of narrower streets, but I think they need to be paired with adequate off-street parking if it's going to happen. So, and again, like I say, in our situation, if I had to rely on transit to get from here to work, and I worked at Hill Air Force Base, which many of our residents do, or in Salt Lake County, which, there's 4,000 people from Box Elder County that commute there every day. If they relied on transit to do that, they'd probably spend 6 or 8 hours out of their day just on that commute, if it was even feasible from where they live.
Yeah, and I will just we're gonna close this one just for the sake of time, but I will just note that there's a lot of cities that don't have transit or have crappy transit that do this for lots of other reasons, and it's not our intention to have this be a transit driven initiative, although it'll be part of the data that comes out will be the relationship to transit, but it's not all about transit for this. And thanks so much for this. And we're going to leave this question open, and you can keep answering into that. And this has been really helpful as we pull these things together and think about how we talk about and address the key issues and questions that tend to resonate around our communities. So thank you for that. Spencer, I'll turn the time back to you. I know we're a little short. You're on mute.
Yep. Thanks for everybody's input and participation in that part, and for your feedback there. That's great. We are at kind of time relative to our meeting, and I apologize. We don't like to keep people over. We've got these items under the direction of WFRC staff. Jory or Ted.
Give me 20 seconds on mine. WFRC is out for public comment on the 2023 RTP. I put a link in the chat. You can make a comment on the interactive map, specific projects, on our document, which documents our process, on the air quality conformity memorandum. So it's all there. There's a form that's easy to use if you're not wanting to use the interactive map. So there you go. Hit me up if you have any questions, email, phone number, or phone. It works also.
Okay, perfect. Maybe we'll just go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or no G, just F. Household travel survey startup. I'll hit these real quick just for the remainder of the group who's here. If you have to jump off, we get it, but we'll try to hit these items real quick.
Spencer, can you hear me?
Yeah, Bert, you got it?
Hey, yeah, good to see you. Hey, just a quick note for everybody that the 2023 statewide household travel survey is starting this week. And announcements are going out every week through June to get additional households to sign up and do the travel diary. We're also doing a student survey that will probably be beginning in early March. But you might get something in the mail if you're one of the households whose address was randomly selected, asking you to take the survey, plot out your family's travels for either a day or a week, and there are corresponding gift card incentives for folks to complete the survey. We're looking at 9,000 households participating and maybe 3,000 to 4,000 students. So just a heads up on that. I'll work through Jory to get a link sent out to the website for the household travel survey. We haven't done this in 10 years. We try to do it about every 10 years, and it will be interesting data to get and share with the planners and modelers who tune into this. So that's pretty much my update. If you got any questions, drop me a line.
Perfect. Thanks, Bert. Appreciate it. Context sensitivity.
Rapid fire. The context sensitivity refers to aligning the design and function of a street with the kind of place that you want to create. Remember, last meeting, you looked for volunteers of those that want to kick the tires on an initiative that we're working on as transportation partners. I just want you to know we haven't forgotten that. We just have had to work through some things. So those that volunteered last time, invites will be coming out in the next 10 days. And if you're curious and you want to be engaged in that and you want to learn more, and this is the first you're hearing about it, just drop me a line, ted@wfrc.org. Now the next one. Guiding our growth is the statewide growth conversation convened by Governor Cox. There's a technical committee on that a week from today. If you're interested on that, drop me a line. We talked more about it last meeting. Last item for me is that, and Spencer, you may want to comment on this, but Spencer has been the chair for a while and has been amazing. And I think, Spencer, you may be willing to continue as the chair, but in our next meeting, we're going to open it up for nominations. And so think about who you want to nominate. Think about if you want to serve as chair or vice chair. And we will address that in an agenda item in April. And Spencer, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but that's it for me.
Nope, that's great, Ted. I don't have anything to add there. I thought you described it well. So we'll look forward to that in the April meeting. So our next meeting will be April 19th, 2023. And if you have a nomination, get it in your brain and bring it to the meeting. So with that, I think that's the end of our meeting. Thanks everybody for hanging on and for hanging out a few more minutes extra. We appreciate it. But I think that's the end. And so with that, we'll adjourn. Till April. And springtime. And funness. And warm weather. I'm just going to keep saying things till everybody's gone. Just kidding.
See you later.